Good afternoon and welcome to today's session. For those of you who weren't with us last week, my name is Anna. This is the second in the 5-part series. I'm a Tibetan Buddhist nun, trained in the Gelugpa tradition of the Tibetan Buddhist philosophy by the great master Venerable Geshe Acharya Thupten Lodin. He's the author of the marvellous course book, Meditations on the Path to Enlightenment. I've also had the good fortune to attend many teachings by His Holiness the Dalai Lama. For those able to join me here last week, we explored the great value of learning about the meaning of impermanence. In a quick recap, we learned that when we listen to teachings on the deeper meaning of change, we think about them carefully and then we meditate, then the ups and downs of life and things won't faze us as much. We'll know that change is a part of life. Whatever meets later parts, whatever rises then falls, whatever joins together will then disperse. Like this pandemic, other experiences like this of Spanish flu, Ebola, SARS, this too will pass. And so by remembering impermanence, we remain steady and stable. And by remaining steady and stable, we'll be in much better position to navigate all the different challenges that arise. So Chris asked a question last week and I said I would take the question on notice. Chris asked if the primordial mind is permanent compared to negative minds. It was a very good question and it resulted in a good discussion and research amongst some of our long-time students to get a precise answer. So a summary of the answer is this: the primordial mind has always been there without beginning and always will be there, unlike individual delusions which come and go. However, because of the special Buddhist definition of impermanence, both the primordial mind and delusions are impermanent. They both depend on causes and conditions, and at a subtle level are changing moment by moment. So Chris, if you or anyone else would like to read the longer answer, I'm happy to send it to you. If you would like to email us at events@tashita.org. Okay, today's topic: love and compassion for a happier life. So this topic was chosen for the second talk because transforming our thinking and attitudes to a more loving and compassionate approach are relevant to the era and can bring profound changes to the mind. So they're very special practices, love and compassion, in Tibetan Buddhism. So when minds of love and compassion grow, they are the source of peace and happiness for both ourselves and others. So by embracing Buddha's thinking on love and compassion, we can transform our lives away from, and that's at a more deep level than we normally talk about these terms. So away from the experiences of suffering and sadness and limitation towards far more relaxed approaches, easier relationships, tranquility, better concentration and clarity. So exploring the deeper meaning of love and compassion can reveal our own approach to happiness. It's one of the benefits of doing such practice. So the Buddha explained himself that underlying all human activity is the quest for more happiness and less suffering. So the value of love and compassion and understanding it more deeply towards ourselves and others is very valuable in this turbulent time. So His Holiness the Dalai Lama said recently that the ultimate source of a happy life is warm-heartedness. He said that even animals display some form of compassion. And when it comes to human beings, compassion can be combined with intelligence. So through the application of reason, compassion can be extended to all 7 billion human beings. So he said that destructive emotions are related to ignorance, while compassion is helpful and related to intelligence. And so the takeout from that is that Compassion, love and compassion, the deeper levels of it, can be taught and they can be learned. So, love in the Buddhist tradition is not quite as we might understand it in Western countries. It's more altruistic, it's peace-focused, and it's described as genuinely and deeply wishing for the happiness of others. Geshe Loden says it transcends ordinary love because it is directed towards the vast expanse of all living beings and not just focused on those close to us. So we have many interpretations in the West, some wonderful, such as the unconditional love of parents for their children, love of leaders for their communities, love of learning. However, sometimes when people talk about love and use this word, it is more about their need. When we say, I love, it can mean I need or I want to be happy. But if we're really honest, there's a few, or it can mean, I want you to be happy. So it can mean that we are seeking something, or it can mean that you want the other person to be happy. But if we're honest with ourselves, there's a few needs in there too, like some kind of exchange or contract. So most often, it's a mix of both altruistic and more self-focused concerns, such as our security, our comfort, our feeling good about some aspect of ourselves, our parents to others, and cultural traditions. So there are so many different computations of the word love and compassion, of the word love and the emotions. Some are very beautiful and some are afflictive that arise. It's a very complex and tangled subject. So we need to carefully check our thinking and our attitudes sitting underneath our expression of love. Is it special, heartfelt, altruistic? Is it peaceful? Is it well-intentioned? And there are so many loving relationships that we have with our families and our children, our parents, our partners and our friends. And all these different types of love have their own different qualities and resonance. There's every gradation and mix, from the self-focus of I love, really meaning I need, to the very pure and altruistic love of the person who really wants other people's happiness and works continuously to achieve that. And then there's millions of nuances and combinations in between. So we need to check ourselves continuously in this regard. But if we really want more substantive peace and happiness for ourselves and others, it is the warm-hearted love that truly wishes for others' happiness that we really want to cultivate through our meditation practice and our study. So when we embrace this kind of love towards others, all sorts of things can happen. We can see this in the behaviours of some of the great loving people in the world, people who have worked tirelessly for others, such as His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Nelson Mandela, Gandhi, and many people think that President Obama is like this as well. So not only are these people recognised as great humanitarians, and they seem so at peace and relaxed in themselves. They seem to be enjoying their lives. So this beautiful interpretation of love, giving love to all others, can be cultivated in ourselves through analysis and deep reflection on our meditation. So Buddhists call this type of love, this all-embracing love, they call it great love. And great love is a heart-warming love that embraces all beings without discrimination. Great love is the wish for all beings without exception to have happiness. That includes every living being, whether they're our friends or our enemies, our neighbours, those very close to us, those who are not so close to us, those we don't even know, strangers, people and beings we have never met, people in other countries, people that we will never meet. people we don't want to meet, and people that we shouldn't meet. It's not a small goal. This great love is a big, warm-hearted mind. So through this loving kindness and this warm-hearted mind, we develop a great closeness to other living beings. We think of them as really dear and precious to us, like a loving parent might think about their only daughter or their only son, not wanting them to experience any harm at all or any suffering. So when the daughter or son is in any form of danger or unwell, the parent simply cannot remain detached and distant. The parent will do anything to relieve that child's suffering and remove the problems. The parent will do this really naturally and spontaneously and without any thought of the burden on their resources and on their time, because heartfelt love gives really strong rise to very strong compassion. So this is the feeling we want to cultivate for all living beings, this kind of feeling of like a parent for their only child. Like this, when we have a deep and genuine feeling of love for all living beings, we'll feel very close to them and we'll think that they're all really precious. So the renowned 8th century Buddhist monk Shantideva famously said, "All suffering comes from the wish for ourselves to be happy, and all joy comes from the wish for others to be happy." That does not necessarily mean we need to sacrifice our own happiness. It's an underlying attitude, it's an approach to life. So His Holiness the Dalai Lama has said, for some people, the idea of compassion entails a complete disregard for or even a sacrifice of their own interests. This is not the case. In fact, we first of all have to have a wish to be happy ourselves. If we don't love ourselves like that, how can we love others? And this could be seen as especially true in such difficult times. For example, if we're going to work 20 hours a day looking after others and forget to eat properly, and so much suffering around, and it would be easy to want to go and do that. But if we work 20 hours a day looking after others and forgetting to eat properly ourselves, to rest and relax and care for our own needs, we're no good for ourselves, and we're ultimately no good for others, because at some point we're going to crash. So what we're really needing to do in this practice is to check up on our underlying attitude. If we spend the whole of our time thinking about and planning and meeting our own needs, we're unlikely to be happy. And we're also really unlikely to be satisfied. We'll never be satisfied. If our thinking and our planning and our activity is broader, then we're likely to have a more long-lasting, satisfied and peaceful outcome. So the companion of love in Buddhist teachings is compassion. And compassion is wishing to free others from their suffering. So why compassion? Compassion has so many benefits under two main headings: benefit for others and benefits for ourselves. So many great Buddhist teachers have devoted their whole lives to studying and teaching compassion. One famous Indian teacher, Chandrakirti, was a strong advocate. So there is a whole tradition for those of us who are familiar with the Buddha's teachings of the graduated path to enlightenment, and that it goes from taking a teacher right through to understanding emptiness and then Vajrayana teachings. So Chandrakirti had a different view. He broke tradition. He advocated and said it was best to emphasise compassion at the beginning, middle and end of one's meditation practice. At the beginning, he said it was like a seed in our spiritual growth, so it's planting this beautiful seed. In the middle, it motivates us to gain all the various qualities we need for that seed to flourish and grow into a beautiful tree or a beautiful plant. And at the end, the compassion is the quality of a very great and special person, helping everyone to remove their suffering continuously. So I remember Geshe Loden, a tremendously compassionate person, once remarking that very compassionate people look for opportunities to help others, and this in turn creates tremendous pleasure and happiness. Amongst modern teachers, the wonderful Thupten Jinpa, the principal translator for His Holiness the Dalai Lama, teaches compassion, I think I mentioned last week, at Stanford University, and that course is now taught all over the world. Thupten Jinpa founded the Centre for Compassion and Altruism Research and Education, CCARE. Research there is showing that compassion training, which includes loving kindness, meditation, is very effective in boosting altruism, as well as improving physical and emotional well-being of the participants. Therefore, there is proof now that we are helping ourselves and helping others at the same time. So according to these CCARE researchers, they said the reason a compassionate lifestyle leads to a greater psychological well-being may be explained by the fact that the act of giving appears to be as pleasurable, if not more so, as the act of receiving. So they've actually shown that in their scientific studies. So then the French scientist turned Tibetan Buddhist monk, Mathieu Ricard, has made it part of his life's work to also show the value of altruism and its connection to happiness. And in his teachings, he refers to a brain scanning study by neuroscientists at the National Institutes of Health. And this study asked the volunteers to think about a scenario in which they would either give money away to a good cause or to keep it for themselves. The researchers were quite stunned to find that imagining giving the money away to those in need activated a primal part of the brain that normally lights up in response to food or physical pleasures, which is suggesting that morality is not only natural to us, but it's deeply pleasurable. So it suggests that the tendency to care for others is indeed innate to human nature, that we indeed have the Buddha nature that Shakyamuni Buddha explained nearly 2,600 years ago. So based on both this modern research and ancient Buddhist wisdom, Ricard sees altruism as an important antidote to unhappiness. When we clearly see suffering, we will have great compassion, explains Geshe Loden in Meditations on the Path to Enlightenment. So this then goes even further, and it says that the resultant sense or feeling of great compassion achieved by wishing to free all living beings from suffering is very liberating. So one of the important practices to train our mind in compassion training is understanding the different forms of suffering. From an everyday point of view, we might think that concentrating on the suffering of others would be very difficult or challenging and even depressing given the challenges of our world and the even greater distress experienced by so many animals and insects and other life forms. From a Buddhist perspective, Geshe Loden explains that ordinary compassion is the wish for one or more people or other living beings to be free of suffering. Great compassion, on the other hand, is the wish that all living beings be free from whatever suffering they experience. We develop this great compassion by cultivating a strong feeling for the freedom of the many sufferings of living beings. So this focus on the freedom from suffering is very important through stabilising meditation, and it's the core of the practice which brings empathy, peace, and sometimes even joy as we imagine the suffering reduced. like freeing a bird or insect that has been trapped in your house, or helping a child that has fallen over. So through studying the many sufferings, we recognise this and can help. And recognising this, both the suffering and that we can help, has a very transformative impact on our mind. So it is really useful to become familiar with the many forms of suffering that are explained in the Path to Enlightenment teachings. So in these times of COVID-19, several different types of suffering are extremely easy to see. And it is said that in periods of suffering, we can actually learn a lot. So we can see so many forms of suffering around us at the moment. We see the suffering of ill health. We see the suffering of ageing. We see the suffering of passing and death. The great suffering of loneliness and isolation. The suffering of uncertainty and change. The suffering of not always getting what we desire. Not being able to achieve the goals that we had anticipated were going to be part of 2020, the suffering of loss, the loss of jobs and access to our loved ones. So many different sufferings are very apparent to us at the moment. So when we reflect on these different types of suffering, physical and mental, that we experience ourselves, we can clearly see through that reflection on our own suffering how much we would really like to get rid of it. We would actually like to be free of that suffering. So the next thing we can do is then reflect and think, well, if we are having that kind of feeling of suffering and wanting to get rid of it, then let's reflect on the suffering of those close to us, our friends and our family, and their experience of suffering and how much they want to get rid of it. And then we can extend that concern to strangers and eventually all living beings. So absolutely no one wants to experience many of the sufferings of COVID or any other form of suffering. And when we do focus on the sufferings, or the many sufferings that we have ourselves, on those of our family and friends and those that we know, we develop an empathy and warm-heartedness. So we empathise in the first instance with that suffering, and then we have the warm-heartedness of wanting ourselves and all others to be relieved of that suffering. That is compassion. That is when compassion is arising. And when we extend that to all living beings, all others, and this is great compassion, and we can meditate on this single-pointedly, this thought and this feeling. We will naturally want to wish. We will naturally want our own suffering to go, and we will naturally want to wish them from suffering, others from suffering, and send them love, wishing for their happiness. So what about difficult people or situations? This is a question that often arises when we consider being more loving and compassionate to people beyond ourselves and our immediate contacts or our family. We encounter all sorts of people throughout our lives, and some of them are easy to get on with and some of them not so easy to get on with. So His Holiness the Dalai Lama, he says that a truly compassionate attitude towards others does not change even if they behave negatively towards us or hurt us. And this is not easy to achieve. It's not an easy thing to feel compassion and love towards those who give us a hard time. But one method is to focus on the behaviour and not the people. So have compassion but not judgment. So we think that behaviour is not quite right, but the person is like me. They have so many different challenges. Just like me, they have good qualities and some not good qualities. So Mahatma Gandhi himself was also a great advocate of non-violence. He advised focusing on the sin and not the sinner. So we kind of need these little tools and little phrases like compassion, not judgment, and focusing on the sin and not the sinner, because it's very easy when we are having a challenge with somebody or we're having difficulties with somebody to get the person and the behaviour tangled up. So through our developing more compassion and more love, we can develop the space and the wisdom and mental dexterity to remain caring towards others, recognising that, like ourselves, they have a mixture of negative and positive minds, and that while they may have been very rude to us or criticised us or hurt us in some way, it's in fact the action or behaviour that's the problem. They too are suffering living beings. At the time, their actions might have been incorrect, and in some cases they may need a response. And we can ask ourselves, what made that person behave that way? Nevertheless, they remain like us, experiencing a mixture of happiness and suffering, possessing a mixture of positive and negative minds, and therefore remaining completely worthy of our love and concern. And then if we combine our newfound focus on love and compassion for that person with impermanence, then we will know that this moment and this difficulty will pass. So there are many great examples of people who have remained completely, while they have been given a very, very hard time, have remained completely kind and compassionate towards all living beings, to all people. So, for example, in spite of losing his country in the 1950s, late 1950s, His Holiness has continuously sought a meaningful dialogue and a negotiated solution to the Tibetan situation. He continuously meets with so many different groups of Chinese people, offering them support and advice for a happier life. His Holiness once told a story of this remarkable monk, Tibetan monk, who was in prison in Lhasa, the main city of Tibet. And he said this monk had explained to him that he was really frightened. This monk was very frightened while he was in prison. So His Holiness inquired further, and the monk explained that he was really not frightened of the challenges of imprisonment, that he was frightened that he would lose compassion for his captors. That is an extraordinary compassion. Whatever the circumstances, continuing to wish for the happiness and freedom from suffering of others, whoever they are. Now that's a very evolved mind to be able to do something like that. So this love and compassion requires quite a bit of development for those of us who are interested in developing love and compassion, more good love and compassion. So during a recent talk on conflict, COVID and compassion, His Holiness received a question from a young Indian woman She wanted to know how to maintain compassion for the perpetrators of justice. His Holiness reminded her that although the Buddha had talked about suffering, he spoke even more about its causes. So since none of us seeks suffering, we need to avoid the causes. And when His Holiness is talking about causes, he's talking about anger and pride, jealousy, miserliness, and all of the different negative aspects of mind that cause us grief. So he suggested that in his answer that people with no moral principle who make trouble for others are engaging in negative actions that will have unfortunate consequences for them. So their troubles will come anyway, sadly. And so therefore, we should be concerned both for these people and for those who have been abused. Another way to look at it, the 8th century Indian master Shantideva, who we mentioned before, he tells us that our enemy can be our best teacher, because no one else gives us such an opportunity to practice patience. The great Tibetan teachers are another great example. Immediately after losing their country, the very fabric of their ancient culture, step by step, they completed their studies as exiles. Step by step, they all worked very hard together to rebuild their lives, first in India and then other parts of the world, learnt new languages, and then brought these incredible teachings to the West. So millions of meditation and Buddhist philosophy students in every country have decided to learn more about studies, more of these studies from the great Tibetan teachers. These teachers have never given up their loving and compassionate goal as young people. Doesn't matter what their circumstances, and sometimes their circumstances were very, very difficult indeed. Went from, for example, from a very, very cold climate to a very, very hot climate. Some people didn't survive. The Indian government was extremely kind to the Tibetan people and gave them land, but nevertheless, that was a massive change in culture and a massive change in climate, and they had so many trials and tribulations to go through. But they continued studying for decades to become highly learned and meditating to become the very best version of themselves, to continue their journey to help others. Extraordinary selflessness of people like His Holiness and Geshe Loden and many others, and their generosity are based on very deep love and compassion, these very beautiful minds that they've worked on and studied and understood and meditated and incorporated into their very own being. So in Tibetan Buddhist practice, there is a further stage, bodhicitta. And this is a big subject, and we have time to just touch on it today. So bodhicitta is the attitude of great compassion, wishing to remove the suffering of all others, and the recognition that to be of the greatest benefit, it is ideal to attain an enlightened mind or become fully awakened like a Buddha. That means being 100% positive all of the time, and then wanting to help others all of the time. That means every thought, every decision, every action, everything is completely focused on support and help for others. So the Sanskrit term bodhi means enlightenment and citta means mind. So the etymology of bodhicitta is mind of enlightenment. There are so many benefits of practicing bodhicitta. And two, especially to mention here, is that all our wishes are fulfilled. We easily succeed in so many things that others will find difficult to do. And a person who has achieved a bodhicitta mind will become a source of peace and love for everyone they encounter and for all living beings, and that just sounds so wonderful. There are two types of bodhicitta. One is called wishing bodhicitta and the second is called venturing bodhicitta. And they're pretty much as their words describe them. So wishing bodhicitta is just as it sounds. We have the thought that the state of enlightenment sounds like a marvellous goal and a marvellous way to help others. We've decided that that's what we'd like to do. So we take on venturing bodhicitta. So we set on this course. Excuse me. Not a cold, just a little bit of hay fever. Venturing bodhicitta is when we set out on the path to enlightenment and study and meditate on all the different subjects of the path to enlightenment so that we can become as a great loving and wonderful person as was Shakyamuni Buddha and the other great teachers that have followed. So bodhicitta is a practice that can be incorporated into every part of our lives. If it's to develop strong bodhicitta motivation for all of our activities will bring significant changes to the mental continuum. So it's really not easy to conclude all living beings as the objects of our heartfelt love and compassion, and to strive for their benefit by attaining enlightenment. And it's certainly not an easy thing to do all of the time. Every time we take a breath or every time that we make a decision, we actually need to train our minds to become like this and function like this. And as His Holiness said, that's possible. So that's why we would undertake a course such as the Graduated Path to Enlightenment to enable our mind to become this great and kind and giving person automatically, spontaneously, without thought, without other thought. So at first, our actions tend to remain focused on the narrow self-interest of our lives and the personal peace of liberation. But if we want more than that, and if we want to go beyond, that's when we work on training our minds of great love, great compassion, learning about the many forms of sufferings, learning about other afflictive minds, and in the all-embracing mind of bodhicitta. So as the Buddha himself said, set your heart on doing good. Do it over and over again, and you will be filled with joy. That means developing minds of love and compassion and bodhicitta, generosity, patience, ethics, not harming others, joyous effort, concentration and wisdom. And we'll explore 6 of these kinds of minds next week. So the true wonder is that this transformation is something that we all can experience. If we want to, if we listen carefully and follow what these teachings are saying. So many of us think deep down, and sometimes it can be very deep down, that this doesn't really include me. This can't be us. But the reality is that even someone, the stories tell us that even someone who has been very negative and done really terrible things in the past can transform themselves with an understanding and practice of love and compassion. So there are stories in Tibetan literature and Tibetan teachings of people who have not just been a little bit selfish, a little bit angry, a thief or an habitual liar, but terrible criminals and murderers who have really hurt and damaged and killed so many other people. Their misdemeanours have caused untold grief, not just to their victims, but to themselves. Their negative activities were just their minds, their decision-making heading in the wrong direction. They didn't bring the police, they probably did bring the police, the peace or even the notoriety they were hoping for. Their personal pain continued and generally got worse. Maybe through guilt, but often through the disintegration of their connectedness, their peace, their self-esteem, their peace of mind, their lack of popularity, their anxiety, and their sheer pain. They were really looking for happiness in the wrong place. And there are stories within Tibetan literature that there were people like this who then had the good fortune to meet a great teacher who was able to support them and give them the teachings that they needed to change direction. And because some of these people had great energy and enthusiasm for heading in the wrong direction, they were then able to reorient this energy and enthusiasm and head in the right direction. And some are even known to have reached enlightenment. So this can all happen. They're very dramatic stories. This can also happen on a much smaller scale. So our irritation, petty jealousy, self-focused behaviour, something like, Melbourne's famous anti-maskers and others who refuse to practice social distancing. Some of these people did not look so happy as they were shouting that they were not being given the freedom that they needed. They looked very unhappy and very angry when they were speaking to the media, these people. So they were heading in the wrong direction. So, as mentioned before, developing the mind of bodhicitta is an extensive subject with lots more aspects than we can explore today. But how can we just transform our mind? And I think, as we touched on last week, the way to do that is to combine our understanding, that is through listening to the teachings, and that can also be reading the teachings. Then thinking about the teachings, does this make sense? Does what the teacher or the book say provide some logic? Am I interested in this? And then meditating. So meditation is a tool that opens our mind, is a tool that opens up the world of the mind. So we begin to observe as we learn to meditate what is going on, number one, in our mind. And we can see the nature and pervasiveness of the mind, that everything that happens to us is really directed by the mind. The mind directs the traffic. And slowly it dawns on us that there is no other world than that of the mind. And we can change the mind. We can change the mind through our listening or reading. We can change the mind through thinking about these subjects if they make sense, by asking more questions if they don't make sense, and then by meditating on the conclusions that we come to. So the condition of our mind shapes how we experience the world. Meditation, the great beauty of meditation is that it directly addresses the mind. So let's do some meditation, and we're going to start by doing some meditation, some stabilising meditation, so that we can withdraw from the activities of today and yesterday and everything that's going on. And then we will do some meditation on sending love. So to start our meditation practice, we get into a nice, comfortable posture. And sitting on a chair is fine. or sitting cross-legged on the floor, whichever is most comfortable for you. The most important aspect of a good meditation is to have a good straight back. And then we want to have our shoulders relaxed so we can lift them up and we can drop them down. And then we're going to just look forward slightly down the bridge of our nose. If we have our head too high, then we'll get very agitated. If we have it too low, then there's a risk that we'll get sleepy. So we're going to place our hands like so, with the right sitting in the left and our thumbs together. And then we just relax our arms, make sure our shoulders are relaxed, relax our arms and rest them in our lap. Rest the tongue on the roof of the mouth with the tip just behind the teeth is a great way to prevent the build-up of saliva. Then we can either close our eyes, or if we're well practiced, we can just have them slightly open. So having our elbows away from the torso, that also will help prevent sleepiness. And having our eyes slightly open is another good tool if we can manage that, but not to stress and strain. Everything about this is about being a combination. Everything about meditation is about being a really good combination of alert and relaxed all together. So not too sleepy, but nice and relaxed. Not agitated, but alert and focused. So we're going to begin our meditation by focusing on the breath as it enters and leaves the nostrils. Now, some people might want to concentrate on the breath leaving and entering the nostrils, and that's fine. Others might prefer to focus on the rising and falling of the diaphragm, or the rising and falling of the chest, whichever of those places feels the most comfortable for you. But once you've chosen the place that you prefer, it is much better to stay with that form of observation. So first of all, we begin by clearly identifying the object, and the object today is the breath. There can be many other objects in our meditation, but today it's just the breath, the mere sensation of the breath in and out, or the rising and falling of the diaphragm or chest. So we begin by making a very strong determination that this will be our only object. We are just going to focus on the breath. If other thoughts come, we're going to just let them go very gently and return to the breath. All other thoughts about the day, about any worries, about what's happening with COVID, any plans for the future, any daydreams, what's going to happen tonight for dinner and TV show you might watch, feelings and sensations. These are all mere distractions from this beautiful small space of time that we've allotted to our mind, to improving the quality of our mind. At first, developing our concentration, which is a very important aspect of our meditation practice. Whenever anything else arises, we simply label it as distraction and gently bring our concentration back to the breath. Maintaining our concentration on the breath, we use a small part of our attention to count from 1 to 10. It's 1 breath in and 1 breath out are counted as 1. If we get to 10, then we just simply start again. If we find that we're losing our concentration during the counting of 1 to 10, then we simply start again. Trying to maintain our concentration on the 1 to 10. Just gently letting go any thoughts or distractions that might happen. Not remonstrating ourselves if we don't get it right. This is a learned practice. It's a skill, like learning to hurdle or learning to ski. We just take ourselves back to the beginning, letting go of all other thoughts, and start at 1. And if we practice, we'll eventually do it with great ease. So we aim to commence a regular practice of breathing meditation for 10 to 15 minutes, 3 times a week. Meditation is a learned skill, and after regular practice, it is very likely you will improve. And as you improve, you'll feel the benefits of more peace, more concentration, less stress, a sense of spaciousness, and so many other good qualities. So now we're going to finish counting and change our object of concentration. Going to focus on the out-breath. And as we breathe out, we visualize that we breathe out all our problems, any challenges we're facing, as a result of COVID-19 or any other situations, unhappiness and suffering. Breathing out in the form of black smoke or black light if you prefer. Just focused on the out-breath. Everything negative, every problem, every concern, leaving our body in the form of black smoke or black light, which then disappear into the ground. Black smoke represents any sickness or causes of sickness, any causes of a short life, worries, anxieties, challenges, any anger or frustration or agitation we experience. Or negative states of mind and sources of suffering. Such as any bad memories about times when we've been hurt, any resentment, times when we think we have failed in the past, and any limitations that we felt have arisen as a result of such failings. Any time that we've been struggling with the many sufferings of the COVID situation, all of these leave from our body on our out-breath in the form of black smoke or black light. Each time we breathe out, we can see all these sources of suffering leave our body and mind until they are completely cleared. And we feel lighter, like crystal, as everything negative, unhelpful goes. Feel lighter and lighter as every negative thought, every negative feeling, every negative experience, everything that's unhappy, and every form of suffering leaves us in the form of black smoke or black light and vanishes deep into the ground. Next, we change our focus again. This time we focus on the in-breath. Imagine that each time we breathe in, we take in brilliant white light. This radiant white light appears as white light, but actually it's all good qualities and happiness, such as joy, such as good health, long life, and all the positive states of mind, such as patience, generosity, joy, compassion, love, the great mind of bodhicitta, and wisdom. With each breath, our body and mind is filled with this beautiful light and all these qualities and other positive qualities we can think of until we are completely full of white light. Now we are completely full, our mind and body, with white light. Radiant, beautiful light. And now we imagine sending this same light to all those we love. Radiating from our heart and our body. Then send it to our friends and our colleagues. It's healing, beautiful light. Then we send it to everyone throughout the world. All of their suffering is immediately dissolved. And all of the world's 7.6 billion people are filled with beautiful white light. And the resultant joy and happiness may want to extend it further to all living beings, animals and insects, fish and birds, that they also have happiness in their environments. We maintain this feeling for as long as possible. And to reflect on great love, we think, may all living beings without exception have happiness and all sources of happiness. Then, in recognition of the effort of this meditation and this class, we can dedicate the positive energy we have created towards more happiness in our own lives, more good conditions, better health, and also happiness and good conditions for the people that we love and for strangers, and if we like, for all living beings. And when we're ready, we can release our concentration and end our meditation. So next week we will explore pathways to inner peace. And the 6 was known as the 6 perfections. And if you have time and would like to follow up with your session today, recommend some breathing meditation for those of you who've not done a lot of meditation, and some meditation on developing the mind of love. So we've got a few minutes left. If anyone would like to ask a question, you'd be welcome. If I can answer it, I'll answer it now. And if it was a big question like Chris asked last week, then I'll take it on notice. Thank you, Pam, and thank you, Nikki, for your kind comments. So Nikki has asked if next week's Father's Day. I think next week is still a class. It's the 30th. Is that right? So the week after is Father's Day, Nikki. So there will be an introduction class next week. We have a big series of prayers coming up to commemorate our founder, our founder and spiritual guide, Venerable Geshe Acharya Thupten Lodin, passed away and went into meditative equipoise some 9 years ago, and so we're having an extended series of prayers for over 10 days. If anyone has not received our email, please, and would like to participate in that, please email events@toshita.org and we'll send you the program. Okay, we'll wait a minute or so in case there's any buffering to see if there's any questions. Thank you, Chris, and thank you, Deb. Okay, so thanks everyone, and wishing you all the very best for the week ahead. Okay, thank you. Good afternoon.